Just a quick video today. I just want to go over how I add shading and lighting to my characters, because I feel like I normally draw these characters and I don't really think much of it while I do it. And I realized that quite recently, and I thought it would be a good idea just to explain my process behind it. So let's get round to it then. As this is going about shading and lighting, I've kind of skipped a few of the phases beforehand, like sketch, line art, and base coloring. That'll be something I'll cover in a future video, so yeah. But let's just say I've got something already here and let's use it, right? So normally what I do first is I put everything into a folder, like what I've shown here. Everything's kind of all put together in a folder, all separated into nice even things, like the colouring. And so before we even think about adding lighting or shading for that matter, we need to understand where the actual light source is coming from. So for this piece, I like to just do it like a standard piece because I'm not doing any background to this character. So we're going to set the light source above, okay, going down. Just make an arrow there, going down. So the light source will of course shine on the horns or something, on the top of the head and on the tip of the nose, a lot more like that. But the shading, I'm going to set this to blue, the shading will also be going in the opposite direction. So you got to think of your character in a 3D kind of perspective, not just a 2D piece. So normally you say the head is here, there's going to be shading all underneath the neck, because it's hidden away by the head. On the same with the hair, there's going to be some down here, and even on the forehead here and underneath the eyebrows. You got to think of your character in like a 3D space, which can take some time to get used to, but it's also like just, it's hard to explain in some ways. But I guess the best way to put it is try look at actual like real faces, like references online of how lighting works on people's faces, and see where the shading and the lighting kind of like functions in some way, where when pieces pop out more, let's say like the eyebrows, there will be some shading underneath that from where it dips into where your eyes are. You kind of get what I mean. So as long as we have that in mind and a very basic understanding of how that works, we can then move on to actually adding the shading. So normally I like to add the shading first before the lighting. It's just an easier way for me. You could do it the other way around, but that's just what I've done. That's just how I like to do it. So we're going to start with that first. Now what we do is we create a new layer, a raster layer, on top of where everything is in the folder, and then clip that raster layer to the folder so that everything will be underneath it like this. Okay, nice and magical, I know. The next part, very important, is the use of blending modes. I'm not sure if you've heard of this or not, but I'm pretty sure most of you would have had. But in case you haven't, it's all of these underneath here. These are all blending modes, which you apply to layers to change its effect and its behavior, basically. It could then make it used as a form of light source or a form of shading, and a lot more random things and extra, like, yeah. But we're going to mainly focus on multiply for now, because that's, in my opinion, one of the best for shading. I really like using multiply. But even though there are some others out there that are still really good, but multiply is kind of just the basic one I like to use. So we're going to use that first. So the difference, you can see here, there's quite a big difference between what we saw just earlier. So when you go to normal, okay, I'm going to use a smaller brush, is when you add normal blue or any other color, it of course goes over your outline and makes it kind of seep through and overlap. It just doesn't look right, okay? But when you put it as a multiply, it doesn't affect the outline at all, and it adds more of shading to it. I've used a very strong blue, so it doesn't exactly look like shading right now, but if you were to use something more less saturated, let's say if I use something a bit more like that, put it to a tint of purple, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. It does look like shading now, doesn't it? And it's not just that as well, like you can apply that to like the hair as well and everywhere else. It will have that kind of same kind of color and affect it everything else. So you just apply that everywhere and following the same rule I talked about before, and then it will all kind of come together. And it does take more time, I must admit. This whole process does take more time, but it's better than using just an airbrush for shading. And of course, then you can add like blending to it later. After you've added the shading, you can then smudge it together and make it that kind of like blendy look if you feel like still adding it. That on top of that, and perfect balance between the two will go very far. Like, so you never know, I might do that as well. So I'll fast travel the rest of it. Fast travel. Oh my. Oh, I'm so brain rotted by games. Oh my. I meant I'm gonna speed up time real quick to show the process of me drawing and adding the shading. So I'll meet you at the other side, okay? Okay then, now that we've finished the shading, and before we move on, I just want to show you a quick something, just in case if you're not a big fan of the multiply blending mode. There is another one that I really like using as well, called Linear Burn, which is a bit too more underneath it, which makes it a lot more darker. But if you were to lower the opacity by just about almost half, or up to like 60%, you can kind of see that it does still kind of give you that shading look, and in my opinion it can look a lot better, and it does give you a bit more variety of what to pick, and it's a lot more forgiving. So I'm going to stick with Linear Burn for now. It's up to you if you want to stick with it or not. I do like multiply, but Linear Burn can be better in some aspects as well. Lighting can affect different things differently in some aspects, like some objects can reflect more than other objects as well. For example, metal reflects more than fabric to some extent as well. So we've got to keep that in mind while also doing this as well. So a new raster layer above the shading layer. Make sure it's clipped to the color and everything else as well on that folder. Make sure the blending mode is add or add glow. That makes it a sort of like light source that reflects. So, for example, if I were to pick like a light blue, alright, if we were to set it to normal, okay, and I add bits to the top of the hair like this, alright, just something like this, which looks alright. But when you add it to an add glow, you can kind of see that it reflects more. Now you can see I've already added bits of like highlights to the hair. That's because the character's hair, I designed it to be very shiny to some extent. I gave this character very shiny hair. So you gotta just make sure that it follows the rhythm of what you've kind of done. Yeah, just like that. Just kind of like on the hair, just crop it around like this. Nice and simple. And if it's way too strong or you've got the wrong color, you can always readjust it and of course lower the opacity and readjust the colors. And you will have to mess around with colors. It's not like as forgiving as Linear Burn is. Like you will need to change colors for different areas. Like I'm using a sort of blue for the hair because the hair is kind of got like a blue tint to it. So I'm gonna add the rest of the highlights to the body, and of course I'll put on a time lapse so you can see how I do it and you can understand the process behind it along with me, because I tend to forget what I actually do most of the time. I never really record my stuff, so this is gonna be quite interesting to see. Alrighty then, now that the highlights and the lighting have been added, we have finished that part. And you might have seen that I was using multiple brushes that time, so on top of that I was using the G Pen, which is the brush I've been using throughout the entire video. I was also using the airbrush on things that aren't reflective, like fabric for the clothing like I've done here. And next is the final phase, like the finishing touches, which I like to put. So we do a new layer on top of that, clip it again, the usual, and we set it to soft light. So soft light is very important for the last step because it kind of just helps make things a lot more vibrant and easier to see and a lot more just nicer. Yeah. So what we use is an airbrush. Okay. I'm going to use a sort of blue for this because the character is set outside. Okay, so we make it blue to make it look all nice. So as you can see, it kind of gives it that vibrant look to some extent. We can do a bit more vibrant, maybe add a bit more white at the top. Oh, maybe not that much, but you can see you can add a bit of a gradient to what's going on. Maybe make it darker at the bottom, because why not? And maybe a bit more vibrant by the tail. A bit more. Yeah, there we go. So when you give it something like this, it's very bright. So obviously you lower the opacity. Okay, and you can see a difference between what's been done here. So you can give it a very subtle amount, or you can give it a lot, depending on where your character is set. If you want it even stronger, you could also use the overlay blender mode. That's a bit stronger. But yeah, I'm going to use an overlay right now. So you can kind of see the difference between overlay and soft light. And hard light goes, that's just built different. But yeah, I might have used the wrong colors to some extent, but you just give it a very subtle amount. Like I'd give it 26. And you can kind of see that it gives it this kind of blue effect. So if I were to then change the background to something a bit more blue, a bit more sky blue, maybe make it a bit darker just to show that there is some level of blue behind it, you can kind of see that it does kind of blend in with what's going on. Or instead of that, you could always change the colors to maybe something a bit more opposite as well. Like you can use yellow for like the sun or something. I don't know, but yeah. And then maybe the polar opposite for the shading. You could also use purple. That could also really help, and it gives it kind of like this sunset look, which I think looks really cool. That will also help as well. So it's all kind of just down to preference, that part, and what messing around with colors, seeing what works with your character and the background as well, if you want to add one. And that will basically be it. That's that. So I've covered everything for now. I've probably missed a few steps, obviously. I missed making the character itself, so I'll do those eventually. If there's any questions or anything that I should have mentioned but never did, you can let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, well, that made my day. So well done, guys. So I'm just going to call it quits here. I am Imagine. This is apparently my channel, and I'll see you all again sometime soon, okay? Take care, everybody.